Every entrepreneur has that one mistake, the one that stings and the one that keeps you up at night. But what if that mistake was actually one of the best things that has ever happened to you? Today, we're diving into a costly error that ultimately led to better leadership, smarter decisions, and a stronger business. Welcome to Get to Know the CEO. Let's get into it. Hi, Chi. Take us back to that moment. What happened and what was this $10,000 mistake?
Yeah, thanks, Anj. So I would say one of our costliest mistakes was just simply moving too quickly. We were looking at multiple vendors for a technology solution, and we actually signed a contract with one of them for $20,000. The same day that we signed the contract, within just a couple of hours, we emailed that company and said, hey, look, we actually are not 100% sure about this. Can we take another day to think about it and void the contract? And to our surprise, they didn't. And they requested that $20,000 from us. And in the end, we actually ended up paying it for basically just to get out of the contract. So I would say that costly mistake of $20,000, especially given it was at the beginning of our
Mhm.
journey, was quite painful. But we learned that being patient rather than doing the old startup, break things and move fast can actually save a lot of headache and money in the long.
Yeah, so like the moment you realized that this was a mistake to like sign this contract with them, what was like your first reaction? Did you panic or like who did you talk to about this and like how did you come up with like a resolution to fix this one?
Yeah, so my first reaction was kind of disbelief because we just simply signed something on paper. Nothing had
Mm.
been done. There was no lift on the companies, on the vendor side to actually provide us the solution. And it was just a couple hours after signing. So I was in disbelief, honestly, when they said no. And then we took probably a couple of weeks back and forth just to see if we can reduce the bill, which the vendor was actually not willing to do. And
Mhm.
at the end of the day, we unfortunately just had to foot the bill, and that's how we resolved it. Otherwise, they were going to take us to litigation. So I would really just say it was tough experience to learn that some people will hold you to contract,
Mm.
even if it was just an hour or 10 minutes after
Mm.
signature. And it's better to avoid the headache and be patient and think through your options before jumping into a contract.
Yeah, I think this also happens a lot in like real life situations. So I actually just had an incident similar to this one. So I'm coming back home and I book a trip for my family. And then suddenly my younger brother is like, I don't want to go because I don't want to miss my, what do you call this? My badminton training. But like I've booked the hotel already. And then I called the hotel and I'm like, hey, can I cancel? Because one of the people coming can't go anymore and they're like no sorry and I'm like but you haven't even been there, it's like 2 weeks even before this trip, but like it is what it is, it really happens sometimes, like these unreasonable contracts get signed or like you're put into these situations that you really have no control of. So I think like on my end probably I should have like taken like an insurance, so if I wanted to cancel this it wouldn't cost me anything. Yeah, so how did this mistake impact the business short term? I know this happened at the beginning of Charge Blast, and it's a big money involved for a startup. So like did this in any way impact the business short term? Were there financial setbacks, maybe operational hiccups, or even reputational damage?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say the biggest setback was we were out $20,000. And at that point, we weren't cash flow positive yet. So
Mhm.
we had to front up more money to cover our overall costs. And we had to reduce our ad spend for a couple of months as well to reduce the cost because $20,000 was a lot of money for a company that was maybe cash flowing $3,000 a month at that point, right?
Yeah,
That's
it's
like
probably
7 months of cash flow, really. So it was really painful, and those were ultimately like the ways that we were damaged from it.
and definitely it's even more difficult for a type of business like you said, like you were had to reduce ad spend, and a lot of times like some businesses operate or like get cash from running ads, like from their ROAS. So like, cutting your budget for ad is definitely going to affect the cash flow that's coming in from supposedly ads that you're pushing. And every mistake
Exactly.
has a lesson in disguise. And looking back, did this experience teach you anything about leadership and strategy? Chargeblast is over a year and a half old. So did this experience in any way teach you anything about leadership and strategy, looking at how your organization is what it is right now, especially that you're dealing with more people and outside the company.
Yeah, I would say that I've built processes around reviewing large invoices and bills and reviewing our legal contracts in more depth. So we've actually contracted a third party legal firm called Ballard Spahr, and they help us review a lot of different legal contracts. So we make sure that we have different outs if needed, and we're not going to be stuck in a contract that's completely against us. And just in terms of leadership as well, I've spoken with a lot of e-commerce companies, especially
Mhm.
those that require inventory. And they've had similar situations that led them to basically be out a bunch of cash, right?
Mhm.
And in those situations for e-commerce, it's possibly business ending because they need to
Mhm.
pay for inventory. They need to pay their vendors. And if they don't have the cash, they can't deliver. And it's a spiraling circle of chargebacks and eventually account shutdown that basically puts their business in the ground.
Yeah, I think this teaches a lot of lessons, especially to those who are looking to starting a business, making sure you get to read like the fine prints of the contracts that you're signing so you don't lose any money. And I wonder, from your perspective, why do you think failure often teaches us more than success?
I would say that entrepreneurs are the type that will try first and then deal with problems later. And I think that's a
Mhm.
great way to learn because the pain really ingrains into yourself the lessons that are taught to you through the life of business and startup life. And I think ultimately learning from your mistakes is the best way to learn because when you have that mistake, you also learn how to resolve that mistake as opposed to simply reading a book that tells you don't make this mistake. Because the way you go about resolving mistakes can be leveraged to addressing other problems, similar situations, so you can get out of that problem much faster. So I'm a big fan of learning from your mistakes.
Yeah, definitely. Because mistakes are almost inevitable in any type of entrepreneurship, especially
Mhm.
in fintech, where risk taking is part of the game.
Correct. Absolutely.
Okay. When costly mistakes happen in businesses, resilience is key. So, what would you advise to entrepreneurs on bouncing back from setbacks?
Yeah, you should definitely be problem solving oriented. There's very little that can be accomplished through complaining or freaking out. Really, just take a deep breath and think about all the different options you have to resolve the problem. Also, go to any advisors you have or friends that have maybe possibly been in the same situation and see what they did in the past. And at the end of the day, by figuring out and sitting down and taking time to find the right solution, it'll save a lot of headache and you'll get the problem resolved much faster than you think. And at the end of the day, also, like problems will come and pass. Just as long as you keep your head down and address the situation at hand, it's going to pass. And then you can go back to focusing on the more important parts of your business.
Yeah. So you're at that mindset right now. And when you're an entrepreneur, when you're starting a business, you're most likely, like when you're starting it, you're most likely at the mindset that's like, let's crush it, let's do it, let's do well. And then, something big happens, something costly happens. Do these things ever affect the mindset that you have as an entrepreneur?
Absolutely. I have bad days all the time. As a CEO, I think that's kind of your status quo is you're really trying to figure out all the problems that are happening within the business, whether it's operational inefficiency, whether it's inefficient ad spend, whether it's a legal contract that's come up that you have to deal with. There's always problems. And that's kind of the CEO role, is you're there to either help your employees overcome those problems by providing them advice as well as resources, or actually just tackle them yourself. So it's tough being a CEO of a company, but at the end of the day, when you get through that obstacle, it's incredibly rewarding.
Now, going on a lighter note, let's maybe talk about comparing this costly mistake to a personal experience that has happened to you maybe a couple of years back, maybe something recently, just so, we can talk about it on a lighter note, maybe for people or maybe for listeners who aren't really running any businesses, just so they can relate to this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's nights when maybe you go out with your friends and then you drink maybe a little bit too much and then you run up a huge bill. And it costs
Mhm.
you, let's just say $1,000. That's quite a lot of money, but some nights can really run up the credit cards, right? Really creating some, I guess what you could call them are little triggers,
Mhm.
right? To make sure that if something is happening, do X, Y, or Z. So if
Mhm.
I'm going out with some close friends that I know that like to drink, make sure I only bring cash,
Yeah.
right? So then
And
I
you only
cap
spend that
myself
cash. Yeah.
and you only spend that cash, right? Don't have your credit card on hand. Don't have your debit card on hand because, as we all know, maybe you're 5 drinks deep and then all of a sudden you're withdrawing more
Take
cash,
the
or
tape.
yeah, you take the tab and then before you know it's another $1,000 night. So having these triggers, like, just putting it back into the business context, if you're signing a very important contract, make sure to review specific sections or make sure you get legal counsel, make sure you run through this contract with some of your other friends in business and get their advice, right? So these triggers are really useful in preventing problems from occurring because you're proactively taking steps to mitigate the risk of those problems.
Yeah, that's like the professional approach to it. But like when it happens in real life, you're just like, you're totally screwed. All you can do is laugh and, say, this what it is.
That too, right? There will be some situations like when we pay the $20,000 invoice for literally nothing. It is what it is. We've learned our lesson and you move on from there. You can't just give up because something bad happened.
So just for some final takeaways for entrepreneurs listening who are afraid of making mistakes, what's one piece of advice you'd give to them?
I would say, first off, mistakes are going to happen. The best thing you can do is own it and don't point fingers. And even if it's a mistake that wasn't caused by you, own it as well, because everyone on your team reports to you ultimately. And it's your responsibility to make sure everyone succeeds. And if they need help, it's also your problem to help with, right? So
Mhm.
always put in effort and resolve the problems as quickly as you can with as little emotion as possible so that you guys can overcome that obstacle and move on to growing the business and improving margins, etc.
And that's a wrap on today's episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to subscribe and share it with fellow entrepreneurs. Let's get to know the CEO, and we'll see you again.
Thank you.